What's going on, everyone? So, according to rumors that are going around for Scream 7, this is supposed to take place on the 30th anniversary of the Billy and Stu Woodsboro murders, right? And kind of makes sense based on other rumors that are going around. Obviously, these are just rumors. Obviously, it's just, speculation at this point. To always take it with a grain of salt. But word that keeps going around is that, hey, this motive is supposed to be very personal to Sydney. It's supposed to kind of mess with her mental state a little bit. It's supposed to be this tie-in and connection. Okay, well, you kind of go down the checklist of all the things that have been kind of rumored, and it's like, okay, having the 30th year anniversary as your kind of point of, motive and reasoning and all that stuff, just it starts adding up and making a lot of sense. Now, you're seeing this film kind of get back and shift back to a Sydney and Gale-esque film. Sydney and Gale are supposed to be the focal points. This is supposed to be a very personal, very direct, very just Sydney-focused, Sydney-centric film. And gonna dive into this. Not big fan of this. But Stu Macher, if you were ever going to do it, now would be the time. Now, many of you know, and for those that don't know, I am not a fan of the Stu Macher whatsoever. I'm not. I think it's silly. I think, where has he been the last 30 years? Right? Just no mention, no nothing, no anything. I just think, if you're going to bring Stu back now, there's just so much you need to answer. Right? It's one of those things where it's just if you were going to bring Stu back, it would have to be over the course of several films, not one film. Because you're not going to be able to answer everything that needs to be answered. It's just going to seem very random, right? And that's my problem. But a lot of the rumors kind of make sense if it is Stu. It's very personal. It's the 30th anniversary. It really, the this Ghostface really affects Sydney in, an emotional manner and a psychological manner, right? If Stu is back, maybe he's getting out of prison. Maybe he's been locked up for the last 30 years or whatever. And now he's getting out. And now, that's messing with, Sydney's psyche. And then Ghostface shows up, right? Again, if you were ever going to do Stu, now's the time to do it. Again, I'm not a fan of it. I still wouldn't bet on it happening. I still don't think it would happen. But I will concede that if you were ever going to do it in hey, we need to put butts in seats. We just lost Sam and Tara. We just, Melissa and Jenna, right? We're trying to make a new trilogy and establish a new trilogy, right? We want to make a big splash. We want to make as much money as possible. We want to have this 30th anniversary sequel. You start kind of going down this checklist, and it's well, if they were going to do Stu, it would make sense to do Stu now, right? It makes sense to find a way and creative way to bring Stu back. You got Kevin Williamson back now. You got Sydney and Gale, right? You could do Stu in a sense to where it's my concern is just the story. How do you make it make sense? And how do you explain everything? Now, if he's been locked up the last 30 years, right? Okay, but it's just how come we never heard anything about it? Don't you think that'd be a point of emphasis? Don't you think that'd be a talking point? Don't they? But movies, period, just kind of brush over stuff. I mean, the Scream 5, brushed over everything. Right? I mean, the last time we saw any of these people was at the events of Jill. We didn't hear anything about that. We didn't hear, what happened? Is Jill still believed to be a celebrity? Is Jill, still believed to be, does everyone know? We didn't get nothing. Right? It was just, straight to Scream 96 cloning, right? So, look, Matthew Lillard has teased and played with the idea. Matthew Lillard would come back in a heartbeat if he could. I don't think that that's a mystery or question anybody. I think everyone's yeah, Matthew Lillard would be back tomorrow if they called. Um, I just, if you're going to do that, it's got to be a good convincing story. And like I mentioned, I would do it over the course of several films. So you could do the reveal in this movie, but I would prefer that be it. Right? Like, what I mean by that is, like, I don't want, if they are to bring back Stu, which again, not a big fan of it. 2, I still don't think it'll happen. But I would set this movie and kind of lay the breadcrumbs and kind of, you could even almost like directly, make it seem like, oh, Stu's back, Stu's attacking, and it's kind of like, nah, they're not really gonna do that. From an audience standpoint, right? Kind of lay the clues that, hey, Stu might be back, right? And then, it's gonna be, it's gonna be, his sister. It's gonna be, Leslie Macher. It's gonna be something. It's not gonna be Stu. And then boom, it's Stu, right? And it's like, oh wow, they really did go that route. But to me, I would, kind of lay the breadcrumbs, but have him like basically in this movie on a cliffhanger with Stu being revealed, right? Maybe Stu's not even revealed to Sydney, right? Maybe Sydney doesn't know. Maybe you do go the cult route, and Sidney Prescott ends up taking out these Ghostface, and then you have this like Thanos moment of like, I'll do it myself type thing, where Stu is alive, and Stu is the head, and maybe he takes off his mask and he's like staring at Sydney through a window or something. I think that could be an interesting kind of play, interesting kind of tie-in. I think that could be a way to do it, so that way, the next film, you kind of start getting the backstory. You get a couple crumbs, right? Get some mentions. Like, do you think that maybe it's Stu? Stu got out a month ago or whatever, or got out last year, whatever. You kind of, again, you start laying the breadcrumbs that it's going to be Stu. You start piecing together the story, and then that way you have the reveal. It's, oh my goodness, it's him. And then you go into the next film with the audience aware that it's him, and now you're starting to get more information, and then that's the only way I see it really making sense and things getting caught up. Right? Because if you just like, have like show Stu getting out of prison, and then Ghostface starts attacking, and then sitting there, there's just so many questions. Like, okay, like, so nobody mentioned him. There was no time. There was no nothing. Like, what is going on? Like, I would prefer there being kind of dialogue. Especially Kirby. Kirby's supposed to be in this film, and it's supposed to set up a series, right? Like, you could use Kirby as like the information source. Right, so she's the one that's kind of relaying the information and details for everybody, right? And you're starting to piece together in this film the Stu Foundation, and then ultimately you get the quick reveal at the end as like the cliffhanger twist, because they want this to be a trilogy. And then which kills were, maybe it was Sydney. Maybe there's even like a little moment where we see Sydney get attacked and we know it's Stu or whatever, right? Maybe Ghostface says something, I always had a thing for you, Sid, or something like that, and Sydney just thinks it's just some random Ghostface saying Stu or whatever, right? Like, whatever. Like, you could be creative. But I do think if you were ever going to do it, as painful as it is, I think now would be the best time. I also think, and you look at like bringing back Billy, bringing back Kirby, every film they've essentially, I know Billy was, a forced ghost, but it was an hallucination, but still, like, they brought back the idea, scenes and stuff of these characters, right? I wouldn't put it past them to do it. I wouldn't put it past them to bring back Stu. Especially given, again, like, Radio Silence departed. You lost, Melissa and Jenna. You're doing another Sydney film. yes, us diehards are like, yes, Sydney, but how does the general audience feel about that? Because you remember, we're a small fish in a giant ocean, and I talk about this all the time, right? Like us diehard Scream fans, we are a very small portion of the people that are going to see this movie, right? Like there are millions of people that are going to go see this movie, right? And how many of them actually stand? How many of them go like, see, we go Sydney again? But now you get the Stu thing. It's like, oh, wait a minute, right? And you kind of get that big reveal, and then word travels, and now you have the right. Like again, I'm not a fan of it, but if you were ever going to do it, now would be the time. You're doing a Sydney movie. You kind of need the box office draw. You kind of need to build and lay the foundation for a trilogy. You could have that trilogy kind of be centered around Stu, and have that build up with Stu as the whatever, the Lord Sidious Thanos level villain, and they're trying to kind of get to the boss, and you get what I'm saying. And it's the 30th anniversary film, and again, if you were ever going to do that, now would be the time to do that, right? If you were ever going to try to make that work, make that happen, and you got to think, okay, so we get the movie in 2025. 2026 would actually be the 30th anniversary. So if you have the kind of, it's 30 years after Woodsboro in the film world, Stu reveal at the end. Well, when Stu actually gets a main part and gets a bigger role, it would be the 30th anniversary in the real world. Again, you start piecing the kind of clues together, I could see it happening, is my point. I didn't think it would, right? Like, I really didn't. I didn't think, they were clearly trying to go with the Melissa and Jenna route. Sydney's not in the film. They're not bringing Stu back, right? But now that Melissa's departed, now that Jenna's departed, now that all this has happened, again, I'm not a fan of it. Don't really want to see it personally. I mean, obviously, if it's a good story, a good film, and you can make it work, good writing and good execution solves everything. They haven't really done a great job of that, but I digress. Then sure, but I do think if it was ever going to happen, now's the time to make it happen. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you think, honestly, if this was ever going to happen, now makes the most sense? 30th anniversary, all of that. Do you think, no, still don't do it? Stupid, doesn't make sense. How do you feel? Whatever your thoughts are. I love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me out as we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all.